SCS back here for the three most disappointing teams in the NFL this season. All these teams I had projected as playoff teams. Two of these teams I had projected as Super Bowl contenders. And as of this moment, doesn't look very likely for any of them to make the playoffs. So the first one should be kind of obvious, just given who's on screen here. Number 3, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, who currently sit at 5-6, which is last place in the AFC North division that I projected them to win. Now, why did I pick them to win? It shouldn't be that big of a, question mark as to why I did. This team was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They were in the AFC Championship game last year. They mopped the floor with the Buffalo Bills on their home field in the playoffs. This is a team that's had a lot of success in the past 2 seasons. And going into this year, they were actually my favorite to come out of the AFC for a couple of reasons, which, the most notable one is I felt like their offensive line was this was going to be the year that they build up their offensive line and it would stand out and actually protect Burrow. Because, Burrow got to a Super Bowl with a shitty offensive line. So now they went out and spent big money on a guy like Orlando Brown, who has been a Pro Bowler in his career. Well, turns out the line doesn't really matter whenever your quarterback is injured. And it's very evident that Joe Burrow rushed back from injury because Joe Burrow was not good to start the year. I don't remember exactly how many weeks it was. I want to say the first 4 weeks of the season, Joe Burrow just did not look right at all. Week 1, getting, a bludgeoned by the Browns and having a couple other really just grotesque performances, not only on Burrow, he was bad, of course, but the team as a whole just wasn't doing very good. Mixon's had a pretty up and down year as well, but it all comes back to Burrow. He was struggling with injuries, and this team just goes as far as Burrow goes. And if Burrow wasn't playing good, the Bengals, they didn't really have a shot. Well, started to heat up. I can't exactly remember the week it was. The Cardinals, that was the first time we got to see Burrow back to his form that we're used to. And what happened? They got on a roll. They beat the Niners. It looked like they were trudging ahead. Then they lose to the Texans, which threw up a massive red flag for me. Don't get me wrong. I've covered CJ this whole year. I've given him his props. He's been incredible. But from a talent perspective, I don't even think it's close. The Bengals have a far superior roster than Houston, especially playing that game in Cincinnati. Basically a must-win to keep you in the playoff hunt. They lost that game, so that was already kind of a red flag. I was already starting to get kind of disappointed with Cincy. Baltimore's kind of running away with the division here. You need to pick things up. What happens? They get to play Baltimore, and what would have been, I think, a massive game had Burrow not gotten hurt, but he did get hurt. And that essentially ended their season because obviously not only did they lose Burrow in that game, they lose that game to Baltimore. Basically seals that there's zero shot that they're going to win the division. And the play of Jake Browning, let's just say he hasn't impressed me. They lost today. They're currently 5-6, like we said earlier. The only reason they're not higher on the list, though, is because the future is still bright for Cincy. They're going to have, I think, a key departure or two this offseason, whether it's T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, or both. But as long as you have the Burrow and Jamar Chase connection on this team, they're still going to be viable. We saw glimpses of Cincinnati throughout this year. Like I said, I think most notably is the Niner game where they won. That shows me signs that there's not too much to worry about. These guys are still young. The future's still pretty bright for Cincy. So I'm not going to knock them too hard, obviously, because the injury is really what did them in. But some of these other teams, they don't have as much as an excuse. So let's get to the next team here at number 2, the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think that they are the most frustrating team in the NFL right now, just because from a roster standpoint, this team is loaded. You could argue that just from a personnel standpoint, this is a top 5 roster in the NFL. They're sitting at 4-6. They're just not a very good football team, which doesn't make sense because you have a top 5 quarterback. You got weapons around them. You got a line to protect them. You have stars on your defense. It doesn't make sense just from a talent standpoint. But then whenever you look a little further into it, it kind of makes sense why. And that's because the guy running the team is a complete fucking idiot. I've been the biggest vocal critic of Brandon Staley over the past couple of years now. The fact that this guy still remains employed is, I think, one of the biggest mysteries in not only football history, but just the history of the world. This guy is completely incompetent. He's a moron. Like, there's no silver lining to Brandon Staley. I don't want to bash him too much just because I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, but there's negative 30% chance that Brandon Staley will be coaching the Chargers next year. You completely squandered Justin Herbert's talent and wasted it, especially his rookie deal, which is usually the time you go all in. Now Justin Herbert's expensive. Like, you can't afford to bring in another pass rusher. You can't afford to have 2 elite receivers to play with Justin Herbert. Quentin Johnston. I was a big Quentin Johnston guy. You can go back and look. I was really high on him. As of this point in time, kind of looks like a bust, especially whenever he was taken before Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers. That looks like a really bad pick. And it just kind of goes to highlight the incompetence of this team. The management structure of the Los Angeles Chargers needs completely fucking decimated. Tom Telesco, the GM, he's been there forever. And what the hell has he provided for this team? The only reason that this team is talked about is because they always have good quarterback play. Phillip Rivers, now Justin Herbert. But outside of that, the management is awful. The head coaches, when's the last time you look back and the LA Chargers had a great head coach? So if it were me, I'd go in there and just completely clean house, beg Harbaugh to come coach the team. He's going to be expensive, but so fucking what? This is the NFL. If you want to win, you got to pay. I'm sick of this go cheap attitude whenever you make the amount of money you do as an NFL owner. Sell the team then. I don't know. Sorry for that big rant, but like I said, they are legitimately one of the most frustrating teams in the NFL. And for our most disappointing team this year, I have the Buffalo Bills. Now, why do I have them over the Bengals and the Chargers? Well, those two teams, they have clear reasons why they failed this year. For the Bengals, it's the Joe Burrow injury. For the Chargers, it's because they have an incompetent moron as a head coach. The Bills, it's a little more complex. There's not just one thing you can point at and be like, yeah, that's why the Bills have failed. So I don't want to harp on this one too much because I already put out a video about a week or two ago. Whenever they lost to Denver, I put a video out talking about the downfall of the Bills. So if you saw that video of mine, you're going to hear me repeat a lot of the stuff I said in this one now. But I would say if I had to put it to one thing, why the Bills are not having much success this year, it comes down to too over-reliant on Josh Allen to put on his Superman cape and carry the team. We've seen him do it in the past, but I think it's just unreasonable. It's not realistic to ask Josh Allen to just save you on every play. It feels like the Bills, they just never are able to gain in easy ways. It feels like everything has to be a freak show, and Josh Allen just making plays, pulling plays out of his ass and just making things happen. And that's why they fired Ken Dorsey, because it's just too unstable. And I would say another big reason why you're seeing the Bills decline is I think it's time for Sean McDermott to go. It's not a situation like Staley where he's like a moron or anything. It's just, I think what Sean McDermott provides to a football team is just not what the Buffalo Bills need right now. I think a really good comparison for an NBA for this situation would be the Mark Jackson situation with the Warriors. The Warriors were a mess for a long time. Mark Jackson came in, helped develop Steph Curry, and really set them up into the team that they were. So he was really good at developing the team. But then whenever it was time to really start doing the winning, they got rid of Mark Jackson. They brought in Steve Kerr, and they won 4 championships with Steve Kerr. I think that's the situation here now where you need to move off of Sean McDermott, who helped build up your organization, and you need to go out there and get an offensive mind who can really work with Allen to build an unstoppable offense. Maybe a guy like, Brian Dable comes to mind. They'd love to have a redo on that. If you could just press a button right now as a Bills fan to have Brian Dable as your head coach, you'd do that 1,000 times out of 1,000. So McDermott did a really good job of establishing this team, building up the defense. He's not an incompetent guy at all. He just doesn't really fit the current team. So that's been my 3 most disappointing teams this year. Do you think I missed one? Is there a team that should be on here that I didn't talk about? Go ahead and let me know your thoughts. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you listening to me ramble here. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe.